Welcome to the Fit Dads podcast with me, Brad Thompson, as always, Ryan Dutton, and today we've got a special guest, someone who, if ever you're feeling stuck in someone else's version of success, Chris Hewitt from Possible Coaching is here to help you rewrite the script. Chris is all about getting people unstuck, reconnecting with what matters most, and owning a life that actually fits who you are. From homeschooling beginnings and a wild ride through warehouse jobs, film sets, and temp agencies, to leading teams, and finally launched into coaching. Chris's path is a masterclass in unconventional, courageous living. So welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thank you. What an introduction.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. It's I always like to do these gushy intros where we can. And honestly, Chris, the first couple of conversations I had with yourself, you know, when you meet some people in life, Ryan, and they challenge the way that you think and the way that you're living almost, but in such a caring, loving way. So that's definitely what I took from you, Chris, from first sitting down and meeting, which is that a fair assumption of your approach?
Yeah, I guess it is. I suppose it's like a friendly bit of grit in the oyster.
Okay.
Trying to, I think the thing that drives me is really, I can't help but notice what people seem to be capable of that they're not doing or attending to. And I don't just mean in terms of achievements, but in terms of joy and having a full life. So right from being very young, being a teenager, I've been gently picking at people's thinking patterns, I suppose, and about what they're up to, and helping people see maybe how they could be doing things differently in a way that would work better for them.
A bit like biohacking, but for the brain, I guess.
Biohacking. Tell me about biohacking.
Biohacking is like where you try and optimise the way you perform through health, fitness, things like that, nutrition. But
yes.
I guess doing that for cognitive effects,
Yeah.
changing, like I said, the way you think about certain things.
That's set me going. So I think there is something about that. And I'm immediately drawn to that in the sense of the idea of optimization, and that continuous improvement, that feeling we've got of I'm capable of more, there's something more for me. There's a lovely quote from Parker Palmer, which is something like, beneath the experience I call my life, there is a deeper and truer life waiting to be acknowledged. And that really speaks to that for me. It's about there's something more, that we all have that sense of that in a way if we allow ourselves to connect with it. But then the bit that I suppose I maybe peel away from a bit, so I've got a background I did a postgrad in developmental psychology about 11 years ago now. And that did inform my approach a bit, but really I'm not, I wouldn't say I help people optimize their thinking, because it feels much more organic and kind of gut level than that. Does that make sense? Because I don't see myself as being, I'm dead. It's not that no one sees me as being a psychologist. I'm not a psychologist. And it's much more about, everything is much more layman's terms, if that makes sense.
Interesting. I think that's what I gathered, that Chris sort of spoke my language, which is very matter of fact, is very introspective. And I think I walked away from our first conversation thinking he's a potential seeker. Like, there's something really intriguing about Chris's questions. Like, have you got any signature questions that you like to use with people? So if there's someone listening who maybe knows they can do more, obviously we see it a lot in a physical sense where people contact people like myself and Ryan to achieve something they maybe can't do on their own. Is there any signature questions you use to help people reflect?
There probably are. They're so context dependent, and this is one of the things for me. I find we want things to be reusable and replicable, because it's much easier to talk about them and describe them and scale them and invite more people in, and particularly from a business point of view, it would be so much simpler if there could be something that always worked. For me, I can never find those things, so it's all about what emerges in the moment, and it's about. So when I'm coaching someone, my role is to be as present as I possibly can, to be tuned into what I'm hearing from them and what I'm not hearing from them, but also to kind of listen to myself, what's coming up for me. And quite often what I'll say is, okay, while you were talking, here's something that was bubbling up for me. So it's like tuning into your own. We've all got that little inner voice, but just stopping it from interrupting when it wants to, and listening to it, and then figuring out how to filter it into a question, I suppose. But if there's a ballpark of questions, it's normally about what are you not listening to in your own head and heart.
I guess you have to be a very good conversationalist to do all those things at the same time, and it's a real skill, isn't it? We've mentioned it a few times with various guests where I think it was Pete Wakefield was talking about how sometimes when you're talking to someone, you can tell they're not really listening to what you're saying. They're just waiting to jump in and tell you what they want to tell you. And the best conversationalists are listeners. They are very cognizant of what you're saying, and they're choosing their opportune moment to come in. And that's very hard, really difficult in conversation. And actually to, take on what someone else is saying, process that information, and come back with some really good questions or develop that idea a little bit. It's a real skill. Something that I think a lot of people are just born with it as well, aren't they? I think it comes very naturally.
Some people do seem to be. I'm not. I'm an awful conversationalist. If I just let myself run free, I interrupt. I get so excited or just impatient. I want to interrupt. I want to cut people off. I want to share what I'm thinking. I want to tell them what my ideas are. So for me, it's a skill, and it's kind of a practice, if you like. It's something that I actively work on. And one of the first ever paid coaching clients I got, when I was talking to him about maybe working together, he said, "What makes you a good coach then?" And my first thought was, "Oh my God, I've been found out. I can't tell him anything." But then I said, "Well, no, actually, the thing that makes me a good coach is that if I'm coaching that day, I'm going to make sure I've had a good night's sleep, as much as I can guarantee that. I'll meditate that morning. I'll have done some physical movement of some sort, if that's what I need that day. I'll have found ways to park myself and be present in the moment." So for me, in ordinary conversation, it takes a huge amount of effort for me to be a really good conversationalist, because I don't know why, that's how I'm wired. But when I'm coaching people, I suppose I arrive with, I've got a clear role to fulfill, and I've done the work I need to do. There's a Viktor Frankl quote, which is about in something like, I'm going to get this wrong, there is a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap lies our freedom. So it's about working on, for me, widening that gap. So something happens, I feel a reaction inside me. So like you say something, I think, I've got a great idea of how to fix that, or that sounds like this thing that I've noticed in the past, or all these things spark off. But then I've got a choice. What do I do with that? Do I think that is important? Do I believe that? So that's saying my world is more important than your world. Or do I choose in that moment to say, no, right now, your reality is what we're working on. So I'm going to hold on to that. And then when there's a moment, I'm going to share something from my world that I feel could help you to expand yours.
Do you teach that in your coaching practice? That kind of level, that ability to kind of conversate?
I haven't. But, not in my coaching practice. I have got a full day of training I do on listening.
Okay.
I've only run it once so far, but it's something I want to offer to leaders and teams. It's called Listening Well for Life and Leadership, because for me that is the ultimate leadership skill, is being able to listen well. And it builds through, it's very practical, because I think that's how we learn, is through doing, which we were talking about before we started this recording. And it's about experiencing, what does it feel like to listen well, and what are the barriers that come up while you're doing it, and then learning to work with those. And then what does it feel like to be listened to really well? So by the afternoon, people are coaching each other in pairs and seeing what helps, what hinders this.
I always find it a little bit sad almost that people remember those conversations that they feel really listened to, and that's not the default. So I hope that makes sense, that if you sit down, I really remember our conversations, Chris, because we've sat down, I felt really understood, really heard. I'm like, why don't I leave most conversations feeling like that? And it's because everyone's so busy, everyone's got very fast-paced life. Maybe it's not really much time to reflect, and I don't know, maybe you're always thinking, what am I going to say next? Just like Ryan said earlier. I know Ryan said about being born that way and maybe it doesn't come natural to you. Where would you say that thinking's been shaped for you growing up?
The thinking around like learning the importance of this sort of conversation, or the...
Yeah, I know you said like maybe you noticed that you weren't the best conversationalist. Mm-hmm. When did that become a reality? Did you become aware of that early years? Did you think, maybe I need to work on this?
I suppose I've known it for a long time, but for a long time I just accepted it and didn't think it was within my gift to change it, and maybe didn't understand the importance of doing it differently. And as I say, I don't think I'm any better at conversations than I ever have been. I've just learned that I can drop into a mindset because I now know how it works and I know the importance and the value of it. I can choose to do that now at times, but it is always a choice. It's not a natural thing for me, even now. Does that answer the question?
Yeah,
I guess for our audience, just give us a real rundown of like what you do now, where you've come from, what's brought you to this point, and I guess obviously the services and things you provide.
Yeah, sure. So what I do now, I will say I have a tendency to really tell a very long story. So
please, we've got time, man. Don't worry, that's the good thing about podcasting, this long form content.
We can go. Okay. So I always compare it to, I don't know if you ever watched The Simpsons, but Grandpa Simpson used to start a story with like, I had an onion on my belt, which was the fashion at the time, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So a lot of my answers begin like that. I'll start with where I am now. So I started my business the beginning of last year. So the beginning of 2024. It's called Possible. When I started it, I didn't fully know what I was going to do within that container. I knew it was about making work more human. I knew it involved coaching and some other sorts of interventions, I guess. And it was going to be all about not having any really kind of fixed frameworks, and it was going to be quite emergent and based on spending time with people in curiosity. So rather than showing up with answers, showing up with questions. That was what I knew. Where I am now, I've had an incredible 18 months. I mean, it's been wild. Lots of all the ups and downs of business that we all know about, and life that runs alongside it. And where I am now, just starting to expand more into organisational support. So I had a real focus on one-to-one coaching for leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners of all flavours. And then I've started to move more into working with organisations. I still do a lot of one-to-one coaching, but realising it's a place where I can have a real impact, and where I've got a history in public sector, which I'll talk about in a moment. So just started to really build out an offer around group coaching for senior leadership teams in the public sector. Excuse me. So I'm doing some work with the local authority at the minute, working one of their senior leadership teams, and I'm about to start with another one. And it's working around this stuff. It's like the inner work of leadership and helping people tap into their humanness and move away from the desire to kind of systematise and regiment everything and kind of outsource our decision making and our intuition into processes and systems and move back towards kind of quite heart-led stuff. So that's where I am in terms of business focus. It's going to be a season of developing how I talk about what I do, clarifying and reaching out for opportunities to do it. I've got some webinars planned and some other bits and pieces. And then life-wise, I feel like my nervous system is starting to be able to just settle a little bit, because I've had 18 months of, the peril feeling of where's the next month's income coming from. Mm-hmm. I'm very hand to mouth in terms of building the business. Mine's the only income in our family at the moment because we home educate our son, which I was mentioning again before we started recording.
We're going to pick your brains on that. Yeah, I really want to know more about that for sure.
And it's a wonderful thing. Excuse me. Obviously, there's then an added pressure on making the business work, because that's it has to work, otherwise none of us eat. So slightly dramatic, but kind of true in a way. So yeah, feeling like this aspect of organisational work and some of the projects I've got coming in now just feels like a bit more of a stable platform. My I suppose philosophy around business building, in that it works for me, I don't think it works for everyone, is about working with what emerges, rather than that some people are like, oh, you've got to plan in decades, and you've got to have this fixed idea of what you're going to get to, and you've got to know every step along the way. That's not me, and I can't do that. So that means I'm in a bit of a grey, swirly, emergent space a lot of the time, and seeing what evolves through my work. But as I say, that's started to form into something a bit more tangible, which feels great. And then going right back, I suppose what informs my work and why I love really the opportunity to do what I do in the way that I do it is ultimately the fact that I never felt like I belonged anywhere. And growing up as a teenager, I was getting increasingly anxious about going into a workforce, inverted commas, that was kind of all about leaving your humanity at the door, your creativity and your joy and your love and your humanness, and just complying, and just being whatever it is that you're expected to be in that space. And I just couldn't really see how I could ever make that work for me. And I had this sense that I had a potential to do something else, something creative or interesting or different, but I had no idea what it was. So as my teenage years went on, I got more and more worried at a deeper level. I went to university to do sociology because that really interested me, but it certainly didn't open any doors career-wise for me, and I couldn't see how to apply it usefully. So I left uni just really in a state of total panic and despair, thinking, what am I going to do? And you alluded to like a few different jobs I've had. When I counted up, if you count temping and things, I've had 30 or more different jobs over however long. And so I spent, out of uni, the first 5-6 years out of uni, just hopping around between different quite short-term things. Toy shop, record shop, cleaned a nightclub, warehouses, cafes, bars. I was a care worker for a couple of years, which was lovely, very rewarding, but ultimately didn't lead anywhere. Quite a lot of different admin stuff. I worked in a factory making prosthetic knees and hips for a couple of months in Sheffield. That was interesting. I fell into the film industry. I spent 3 years working in film as a technician. That was another interesting chapter and learned a lot. But all the while I was feeling that, to me, it just felt like our ways of working and the places that we work aren't designed for humans to inhabit. There's just too much negligence of the soul, I guess, is how I would see it now. It's this harshness that I don't see how people can thrive in or perform their best. So then when I started work, after I left film, I got a part-time temp job at Sheffield City Council. And I suppose I swallowed all my pride because I'd been doing quite well in the film business, and it was like such a shiny world, like, oh, I'm succeeding in this place, I've been accepted. But I knew something wasn't quite right about it for me. It was just too harsh an environment, and the hours were crazy. You had to work kind of 12 hours a day, 6 days a week when you were on a film, couldn't see your friends, couldn't do the things that filled your cup. So, but when I left, it was very difficult to hold on to a sense of self-esteem, having let go of that thing that I'd built a bit of my sense of pride around, I suppose. So yeah, I went into temping at the lowest kind of temp level of admin worker in Sheffield City Council, but I just happened to land in a really lovely team doing community grants for little micro-organisations around Sheffield. And I had a manager who was a great leader and was just the most human, positive, grounded, kind of encouraging and enabling person, and who supported me. Because what I noticed was I could see how things could be done differently and no one else seemed to care. And I wanted to do something about it. And because what I'd learned from the film world was if you decide to make something happen, you can do it. And a lot of people didn't seem to either know that or care about that. So I just wanted to change things, like on a small level at first. and she supported me to do that. So I started to find this sense of kind of meaning and satisfaction, even in work that I would have thought I was going to hate. Sat at a spreadsheet a lot of the day. But for me, if I can be improving how these spreadsheets work and the wider systems that the spreadsheets sit within, and supporting my manager at the time to work with the team better and use their real skills and develop them as people, then it's a totally different prospect. So then I became a manager. I managed an admin team at the council for 5 years. And through that, again, at the beginning, I was really reluctant to manage people. I wanted to have a bigger impact and to use. I knew I had skills that I wasn't using, but I just hated the idea of having to enact decisions that I didn't agree with, and do things in a way that other people thought was right or that the organisation thought was right, knowing it would upset people and make things worse for them, and that I didn't believe in what these decisions were. But I found, I suppose, that actually I could just not, and I could do it my way. And I could do it in a way that was more human. An example is I had a manager he'd been managing this team of 5 or 6 people. He recruited me to manage them. And I put together their training plan for the year. You have to submit it to get your annual training budget. And he said, I don't think we should be giving them all this training because it's going to cost us money. And then they're going to want to leave because they'll be more skillful. So we need to hold back all that training because otherwise it's going to cost money to recruit more people. And it was just so fundamentally wrong-headed to me and so short-sighted, only looking at what you can measure on paper, which is the cost of recruiting someone, and not looking at the cost of staff who are unmotivated and think you're withholding things from them and are going to give less and less and less. So I went over his head and got a decision from someone else. And I got extra budget so I could create extra training for them that was about personal development. And that was really the beginning of building my belief in this more human way of leading, and sort of doing that. You can do it in a context where you don't have permission, and you can just make things better that way.
That last point in particular has really stuck with me, because that's a little bit like me and Ryan, never letting people get what they want, what they pay us to do, just because we want to keep hold of them for a little bit longer. That seems so humanly unethical.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really hear that. Yeah, and I often say my goal is to make myself redundant. That's I'm not here to create a need for coaching or a dependency. It's about unlocking what that person already has, which then that leads nicely back to the home education thing, because the whole assumption behind what I do in my work and in the way we educate our son is that everyone already has enough. Everyone is enough. Like, you as an individual have got all the skills and abilities and knowledge and wisdom and intuition that you need to do whatever you want. You just need to access it and be supported to believe in yourself. I'm sure you both know this from working with individuals and from a fitness side. It's often people just need validation. They don't actually need your ideas sometimes. They just need to know that their ideas are good and will work, and that they're okay to sort out their own plans and process.
100%.
I always say when I take on a new client, I get this weird vision into the future of where they'll be. So as we're sitting down at that initial call, consultation, they're telling me all these things about them, what they've tried, things that have worked, things that haven't worked, why they're failing. And then you start building this picture up of all the steps in your mind to get them to the point where they're going to be the person they want to be. And as I'm seeing them unfold over the weeks and months, I'm always thinking a good 3 to 6 months ahead of where they are and where they need to be. And that's why I get very invested in my clients, actually, because I have this timeline of where I think they should be at certain points. And when they're not doing that, I'm like, come on, you can do this. Let's knuckle down now. You've got all these tools and skills and abilities, all the things that I've got, and any coach has got, anyone you look online and admire has got. You've got those same things. We just need to unlock those and find systems and habits and routine and structure in your week that kind of gets us there. Just coming back to what you were saying initially about kind of what you provide and how you're trying to really go down this human aspect and the creativity aspect, that kind of, I guess, trumps a lot of the systemized stuff that happens nowadays, and how everything's becoming even with AI, we had a good conversation about AI before we came on the podcast and how everyone can utilise that in a good way. But it's funny, isn't it? Because are we going to get to a point where we're just not really thinking for ourselves? It's kind of, you can't help but think, years, decades down the line and think, is this something that's going to eventually get us to the point where we're not really thinking for ourselves? We're actually now being controlled and all these ideas are just from AI. That was quite a scary thought, and I've seen that discussed a lot online by people who are much more qualified to talk about this than I am. Yeah, interesting. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm in one sense deeply underqualified, but also I would say just as you are, I'm a human being with intuition, and so I'm as qualified as anyone else, as you are, and it really speaks to what you were just saying. So I see my role, the fundamental, if there's one thing that I bring as a coach, and that is my job to bring, it's to see the bigger version of the person in front of me, to witness that person and to speak to that person, and to help the person I'm talking to see that version of themselves, and which is what you've described. So that when you're seeing a client, you're seeing this bigger version of them. You're seeing all the possibilities that they're capable of, and because they're here, they can't see that for themselves. So you're mirroring back to them this expanded sense of them. Now, for me, there's a type of thinking that AI is very good at, which is analysing what already exists. But what I don't think it can do is witness something that is dependent on your gut and your heart and your mind all working together, the nervous system and the synapses and whatever else is in there, and the things that you're sensing, because what you're getting from that interaction, you're never going to be able to put that into words or into a spreadsheet. You wouldn't be able to say, so if I interviewed you after one of those calls and said, what was it that told you that in 6 months' time this person was going to be capable of that? And you could talk for days and you still wouldn't be able to narrow it down because it's felt, and AI can't feel. So, and I might be wrong about that, maybe with, analysing micro expressions of the face or something. Maybe there is something to be read, but my sense is that no, and that actually we're already there, and it's not about things that can be replicated. And coming back to that point earlier, it's obviously for a business or an organisation at scale, it makes sense to be able to systematise and replicate and scale things. And to do that, you need to know and understand something first. But what I'm really interested in business, and I was with the consultancy I used to run, and in my work now, is about coming back to, because I think you can scale humanness, but what you do is you scale the scaffolding that goes around the people that enables them to then use their intuition and their human skills, their sensing, and their kind of that knowing that goes beyond what can be measured. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does that relate to like, is it the Dunbar's number? Have you come across this from Robert Dunbar's number, where apparently you can only, Ryan's
150.
150 is it? Is that as a whole network, and you can only maintain 50 core relationships? Is that right?
Yeah, close connections.
Yeah. So close connections. Okay. So imagine like a dartboard, like a target.
Yeah.
Centre, you got 50 people, core relationships you can maintain at any one time, and then on the outer ring is, somewhat friendly connections, and then 150 is like, that's the peripherals of the network. So anything beyond those 150 people.
It stems back to tribal times when we had very close-knit people. Just going completely off tangent there, one of the reasons why people gossip and like gossiping is because gossip was really important back in those times as well, because it let you know who was good at certain jobs. So if I came to Brad, I said, Chris is crap at washing up, and he's really bad. He's terrible. He doesn't do a good job at all. In our mind, we go, right, we need to allocate this job to someone else, and we'll go and get someone else to be. It was a way of being effective and productive. Nowadays, it's a not so effective tool, and something that's kind of frowned upon a little bit, shall we say? But it's because of this tribe that's grown from pockets of 150 across the world, this huge globally connected network and tribe of billions of people. A thought that I had a second ago was, I think when I started coaching, I was a little bit like AI myself, because I had spent 10 years training and working out the ins and outs of the biomechanics and nutrition, how to optimize what you do. And then when I started coaching, I was like, right, great, I understand all this stuff now. I just tell people how to do it and they'll do it. And then when they didn't do it, I was like, why are you not doing it? Just follow this program like I did and you will get the results. And I couldn't get in my brain as well why someone wouldn't follow the program. This is the blueprint. I've mapped this out for the last 10 years. Just go and follow it and you'll be there. And that's essentially what AI does. It maps you out the blueprint. But what AI won't replicate and won't take over from is very human, emotional, creative jobs. Things that need that sense of a person's soul, like it needs to be in it. And that's where my transfer in coaching changed from, right, we don't just need the blueprint, but we need a support around that. And we need kind of an understanding of psychology. Why aren't they following it? Why is every person different? Why does this person find it really easy to excel in this area, but difficult in that? And why is this person, it's a complete opposite, it's vice versa. And then it's that kind of, it was a lot of psychology. I remember reading a lot of psychology books when I was really starting off in coaching, because I wanted to unlock that potential in them. And that all came from knowing this, understanding this and how it works, as opposed to this as well.
Yeah, totally get that. And it really resonates. And one of the things you're talking about there is motivation, isn't it? And about, you know, what actually drives people to do the things that they do, and whether that drives them to stay where they are and keep doing the habits that are not good for them, or drives them to do the things that we know and they know deep down are going to lead to improvements for them. And someone, not long ago, I had a conversation with someone who's, I can't remember if they're a coach, but they do some kind of support for people where they get together, they have a conversation, they come away with goals. And they were saying to me, it's so frustrating, isn't it? You know, when you set someone all these things to do and they never do them. And I said, and there's no arrogance in this, but I said, to be perfectly honest, that very rarely, if ever, happens for me, because I don't set the goals. I don't set the actions. They come up from the conversation, and I help the person decide what are you going to do with this? And I'm coaching. I've got a fairly new client at the minute. We were talking the other week, and he was saying, normally, you know, my coach will take lots of notes and then give me these actions. I don't take any notes. If you want notes, take them. My notes are going to mean nothing to you. So if you want something useful to take away from this, and after the first session he found, he came back for the second session and said, I actually struggled to understand what I'd written down, you know, usefully afterwards. It's like, okay, so let's spend more time getting your notes good before you leave the session. And I find by helping people to set their own actions, they're things that they feel motivated to do. And then we'll also explore, so you've said you're going to do this. What do you think might get in the way of that during the week? I know it feels like simple and easy now, but what might trip you up? So let's make some plans for how to deal with that. So I help them place themselves in the moment where they're going to be doing it. But it's their thing. They need to own it all. It's nothing to do with me. And that's, to me, that's how you get to people's inherent motivation.
That reminds me of a book I read a long time ago now, which is Motivational Interviewing for Fitness and Nutrition, which I recommend for any coach who's listening. Just go and buy that book, or go and get it on Audible, because it's one of the best books I've ever listened to and read. I tried to do both at the same time, which is a little hack for people. Read the physical one and listen to it as well. It's a crazy way to instill it. And when I started to simmer down those lessons, it felt like a masterclass in manipulation, if you were being cynical about it. It's like, how can I get people to do what I'm telling them to do? And then when you actually boil it down, you're actually supporting people with questions, do what they want to do. But it's such a weird psychological mind mash that it's like, how can I be a facilitator to actually get this person to extract, this is what I want to do, here's what I need to do it. I know that's a big topic of conversation when I was in touch with you yesterday about how can people make better decisions for themselves. You don't strike me as a big framework person, Chris. You're very gut feeling, but if someone maybe is struggling to decide what they want to do, like where can they start?
What they want to do in what sense?
Let's say overall life direction, because I'm cautious that, again, when you become a parent, I do feel like your life, you as a person almost gets diluted a little bit, because you are now somebody's dad, you are a parent, you have a dependent, someone is actually depending on you as a person. If someone is a parent and they do feel a little bit lost? Is there any commonalities you see in those sort of people?
Good question. Let me ponder. Well, I think the first thing is you do need space. If you're going to think deeply about stuff, you need some kind of space where you suspend something that helps you to suspend judgment and shame. So I think a fundamental of change is being heard, empathised with. I don't know if this is your experience, but I find whatever work I'm doing around helping people through change, organisationally, individually, a critical moment is feeling like the thing that's holding you back has been de-shamed. So the part of you that's critical of the part of you that's holding back is kind of forgiven and accepted. And there's a great coach called Steve Chandler, and he talks about the emotional ladder. So that at the bottom of the emotional ladder, you've got shame, fear, resentment, bitterness and hatred and all of these things. And at the top, you've got joyfulness and gratitude and acceptance. And when you're at the bottom of your emotional ladder, you don't have access to your creativity. You can't think about what you might be able to do because it just, in whatever way, turns you inwards and stops you from being able to see different possibilities and seeing yourself as an agent of your own, in your own life. You're seeing your own agency. And if you can find ways to move up the emotional ladder, then you get access to your creativity and you can start to see all the possibilities. And I see this really clearly when I'm talking to people. So one of the things in a first session I'll probably be doing is just helping someone to notice what they've already done and are doing that is good and useful and positive, because we're so focused on where we could be, especially if we're driven people. It's like, I'm so focused on, well, there's always more you could do, isn't there? And there's a part of you that says, I need to hold on to this narrative that I'm not enough, because otherwise I won't keep striving and doing all the things I'm capable of. And it's really kind of alluring, isn't it, that voice?
That resonates, that.
Yeah. And it is. It's like there's a big part of us. But the thinking that got you here won't get you there. And there's a point for me where you have to transition from the self-critical voice and say, that has worked, maybe, to a point, and got me to a certain place. But actually this next chapter needs to be about something different emotional responses, love and acceptance and good feelings. And so if you can help someone to see what's gone well for them and what is going well for them, and also something that can be really useful, I think, is helping people see that they have chosen to be in the situation they're in. And however much there might be things within their environment and their world that are not choosable, that ultimately they are still making a lot of choices to stay where they are. And there's something about accepting that however undesirable aspects of your condition are, that you've chosen them and you're choosing to maintain them, helps people to see that they could then choose to change them. Does that make sense? And I think for me, you have to start opening some of these doors or windows a little bit before you can start thinking about what's really possible. So I think, to answer your question, if you're someone who's thinking, right, I want to consider what I'm capable of, I would say, or what I want in the future, which was what you asked. I would say, first of all, you can't really truly consider what you want before you accept what you're capable of, because it's going to be a really limited little pool you're swimming in.
I asked that question in the guise of someone else, but that's actually for me. I'm not going to. As soon as you said space, I was like, oh yeah, I don't have any headspace at the moment. Like I have, my little boy's going to be 5 in September.
Okay.
I feel like I don't have a moment's peace. I'm not going to lie. I'm either at work with people. If I'm on my own, I'm working. And then if I'm at home, I'm either being talked at by a nearly 5-year-old, or I'm absolutely spent at about 7:30 when he goes to bed.
Yeah,
just slump and be like, oh.
And that really sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Resonates with me from my own experience for a lot of my clients. And I would say, so that I'm doing the thing now. So I would say, first, what an incredible thing you've created. So for one, you've got a thriving business, you've got a successful podcast, you've got all these other things that you've created, you've decided to create these things, you wanted to be a parent, and you're a parent. That's an incredible thing. So, just what you've got, this life, it's full of things that you want. So well done. It's the first
Chris,
thing.
that's all we needed to hear. We can end it there.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah.
See you next one.
And so it's accepting that you've created this thing and that it's good is really important, and allowing yourself to feel grateful for it. So this is about moving up that emotional ladder, and then you can start to think, well, actually, okay, so if I did want to think about what's next, all I need to do is create a bit of time. If that's all I need is some time, what would it take for you to create 1 hour a week where you think about the future, and you do it in a way that is in an environment or in a place or a way that feels nurturing and safe and constructive. And I'm guessing that there's something already bubbling for you and thinking, maybe I could do that.
The promise of a holiday, maybe. That might give me 10 minutes.
I think it's too many people, I guess, in your line of work who are working in the business rather than on the business. And I have this analogy, and it's the bucket analogy. Who's the author and what you've mentioned it a few times? That guy who's got the bucket analogy, where the bucket's full of things and it kind of overflows.
It's called allostatic load, but I know Ollie Newton talks about it really, really well. Guy we've had on.
The allostatic load, I think, for me, when I first started coaching, I'd get like 2 clients, and I'd have like 2 or 3 sessions in the week, and I'd be so overwhelmed. I've got 2 people that relied on me to get their health and fitness to where it needs to be. Oh my God, it's overwhelming. And then that bucket kind of like gets emptied a little bit, goes back down to kind of half full, and then you take kind of like 5 clients. Oh my God, I've got 10 clients now, what the hell? And then that grows and grows and grows. Next thing you know, you're at 40, 50, and it seems almost ridiculous to go back to where you were. But I think what I've come to realise is I don't think the bucket gets any more full. I think you just keep changing the size of the bucket. And I think that the more and the longer you do something, and the more it becomes a routine, the bigger that bucket gets, and the more headspace you somehow manage to find and fill. And I think I've always been quite shocked, actually, like some weeks on how much you get done. And I look back on weeks when I first started, and the smallest mundane tasks would just fill my week and fill me with dread and stress. If you'd told me 10 years ago when I started doing this that I'd be having the weeks now that I was having, I'd be like, I'm not sure I'll ever be able to do that. You can't ever imagine that or comprehend it, but you just adapt and grow. But I think within this whole sequence of events over many years, you do lose touch with why you started, why you're doing it, what the end goal is. And I think it takes just stepping outside of what you're doing in your regular kind of very sometimes efficient or inefficient routine in the week to realise, like, where is this going? I think, as you mentioned, I think holidays are sometimes really good for that. I always find when I'm away, I'm with the family, stress levels are low, and I've not got those little mundane day-to-day tasks that you're thinking about. That's when you can really have this like moment of like, right, what do I want to do? Where's this going? What's kind of direction is this heading in? Who do I want to help? How are we going to grow and expand and reach more people? And I think not many people factor those in enough. I think whether you go away or not, or whether you just take a day once a month, like, right, that is my day off where I have it midweek and I'm going to go for a big walk or just clear my head, something that's out of routine. With those days and weeks off, though, I highly recommend not doing nothing, like sit on the sofa and just trying to think. I always tend to find my best ideas when I'm doing something quite mundane, like loads of DIY last week. So I was having some crazy ideas about certain things while I was painting and decorating. In the shower, I get a lot of ideas. Last thing at night before bed, my mind's racing. I used to have like a notepad by my bed years ago because I'd have so many of these mad ideas that I'd write down. Like I said, long walks sometimes. This is a real strategy for me that I use to sometimes step outside the business and think, right, what are we doing now? Where's this heading?
Yeah, totally that. It's great. And all of that stuff. And I think a lot of people are really capable of doing that for themselves if they choose to, and really focusing that way, or unfocusing and allowing things to emerge. Because like you say, it's kind of, if you look directly at it, you don't tend to get to the good stuff. It's what's in the peripheral vision, isn't it, that just starts to occur.
Absolutely.
And I would say some people can do it by themselves. Some people need a space for it. And that's one of the things that coaching is great for in my experience. Is when I was first coached, when I was running a consultancy years ago, my experience was it's like normal reflection, but without the little voice telling me I'm getting everything wrong. So it's like with that inner critic was just quiet, so I could really think freely. The thing I would say people miss even more often than that, although lots of people miss that, and this is when I'm first talking to someone about coaching together, and this includes with groups, teams of senior leaders, individuals, is zooming out to the extent that you're not just thinking, what do I want this business to create and be like in 5-10 years? Actually saying, what do I want my life to look like? What do I want? What's the perfect day for me? What's the perfect week? How am I spending my time? Because people who I've supported, who've worked with other business coaches, they have said the reason it feels different with me, or one of the reasons, so one is there's no framework. I don't have a series of steps for you to follow because I've got no idea what you want to do and how it's going to work for you. So how could I arrive at that? But also because I don't have a linear concept of success. So I don't think growing your business to exponential profit is the perfect solution for everyone. If that's what you want to do, if you come to me and say, I want to crush my competitors, I want to build this business until it's squeezing every last bit of juice out of itself, I would want to first help you step back and say, why? What gap are you filling in your, what is it you want to create? What do you want your life to look like as a result of this? Because otherwise you get to a place, we put off enjoyment, we postpone pleasure. And there's another quote I love, which is from Annie Dillard, and she says, how we spend our lives is, of course, how we spend our days. Might be the other way around. But the meaning being, I want to spend my life this way. Well, here you are spending your life. In this room now, here, we are spending our lives here. And that's a magical thing if you connect to it and allow yourself to really feel it. But quite often as business people, it's all about, well, I'm building towards this time when I have got the headspace and the money and the whatever to enjoy myself. And I just think, what a waste of being alive. Because you could be enjoying things now. You could be enjoying the journey, and you could be creating something that allows you to both have something incredible in the future and be fulfilled and spend your time in lots of different ways on the way up.
I think that I think everyone has that moment, don't they? Whether you're a business person or not, whether you're employed, that moment where you go, what's this all for? I'm not living the life I want to live right now, but let's just save a few more £1,000 and I might be able to go do X, Y, Z. Let's just wait till I cut my hours back a little bit. I'm not so overtired and overworked. Wait till I get that new job and that career path that I'm on, then things will be... And then 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 years down the line, you go, still saying those same things, still there. And that's, I don't know, is that one of the reasons why mental health and depression and all these kind of, psychological issues are happening across the world, because people are just stuck in this little time lapse of their life. It's a bit like Groundhog Day, isn't it, for a lot of people? Where they can see it's the light end of the tunnel, but they're not actually running towards it. They're on a treadmill, and that light's always there. It feels like that, I think, for a lot of people out there. It does.
It's a very famous example of someone who doesn't quite grasp life day to day, and it's I feel bad quoting A Christmas Carol, but I'm going to do it. It's Ebenezer Scrooge. He needs this mind-bending experience to reflect on his life and be like, actually, your reputation's down the pan, you're chasing material stuff. I actually put out an email last week, very much inspired by Chris, which is about the hedonic treadmill, which is people who just don't know when to stop. When is enough enough?
Yeah.
When is enough enough for you, Chris?
Wow. When is enough enough for me? Never and right now at the same time. So because I would say what I've learned, and I'm not always able to live this because it's balance is it's constantly failing in both directions, isn't it? One at a time. It's never quite the sort of steadiness that you think it's going to be. But I had a realization a couple of years ago when I'd started the coaching practice. I was running this other consultancy, trying to build this thing, this life, this business, all of this stuff. And came to realize that this paradox. So we think that there's two ways we trap ourselves as entrepreneurs. So one is, we were touching on this earlier, it's like, well, if I let go of this striving, if I become too grateful for and satisfied with what I've got now, then I'm never going to fulfill my potential, because I'll lose that drive. And then the other side of it is, if I'm constantly striving, then I'm never going to enjoy kind of what's here right now. And the truth is, you can actually have them both. And in my experience, so the striving for something bigger and greater is part of enjoying being present as well. So it's accepting that there is a certain amount of fulfillment or that is dependent on an unachievable goal, striving for something that is bigger than you, and accepting you will never ever reach it, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go for it. And actually that striving for that unachievable goal is compatible with being really present and appreciating your life as it is. Does that make sense?
Totally. And that resonates massively with like the first probably 5 years of when I started my own business, where I'd have these massive moments of like, right, knuckle down, really kick on, and we'd progress and it'd grow. And then I had these moments where I'd like feeling really guilty of like my life just passing me away. Where'd the last 2 years go? God, we did a lot, but like, you know, mentally and emotionally, like I'm shot, like I'm doing it for nothing. Okay, right, let's book some holidays, go away, take my foot off the gas for a little bit. And then 2 months later, I'd be beating myself up. You're a lazy piece of shit. What are you doing? Like, come on, get back on the grind. Why have you been kicking your feet up? And it was just this constant, I'd say the first, 5-6 years of being in business for me, it was that to a T, and this constant moment. But it was nice, and I look back on it and think it was quite chaotic and crazy, but it actually weirdly worked. I never had the two at the same time as you're mentioning. I never had that. I never ever crossed paths. Mm-hmm. But it was this nice flick of a switch between the two. Mm-hmm. And it seems to somehow like work in a weird way.
Yeah, it was great. And I'm interested in what you think about the idea of those both coexisting. So being 100% grateful for and present, and this is enough. So accepting that everything that you've got now is enough, and also part of it being enough is striving for an unattainable goal at the same time.
I think I'm getting more towards that now. I think I'm definitely less harsh on myself, but I had really big goals when I was starting of where I wanted to be. I think I'm a lot closer towards that now. And then that's that kind of peaceful moment where you realise, okay, I'm kind of where I wanted to be initially. So let's keep the foot down. Let's keep providing amazing service. How can I keep getting better with the people I'm providing to? What can we do to keep pushing forwards? But also little things like I didn't have a kid back then, you know, and that just completely changes your mindset around what's important and where you need to allocate time and how present you need to be for them. It's a real curveball that, and it took me a good, I mean, she's nearly 3 now, but it took me a good couple of years to find that balance. And I think, you know, having your own little family really sorted a lot of those things out for me. So I do think it's possible. I think you can have both. But I think as a young 20-year-old, it's hard to get into that mindset.
I think it's knowing there's multiple ways to do it as well. So one thing I really try and get across to my clients is divergent thinking, which is basically knowing that there's multiple right options. And then it's up to you to decide on the decision cost. Like, okay, you could chase that and you could chase this goal, but at what cost? And as long as they make peace with that and go, yeah, I'm happy with that. And you go, yeah, you're happy with it for now, but let's just have a week or two just to decide, because it is a big decision. Like you sign your name up for a marathon, it's a lot of hours out the house. It's a lot of discipline to not, you know, get carried away with your nutrition, because you don't want to be running when you're too heavy. And so it's all those things to consider. Which, in terms of consideration and the balance, you mentioned earlier, Chris, about balance being resisting, swaying one way, then the other. For back to the homeschooling that we mentioned earlier, you mentioned it's child-led in one of our previous conversations. How does that work in terms of child-led? Because I can promise you, if my child led me to do anything, it would involve being outside on his bike and probably eating chocolate. They'd be my two things.
Yeah.
Do you get that struggle still with your 8-year-old, you say?
Yeah, he's 8. Yeah. Well, yeah. So we came to home education. I was home educated for very different reasons. Well, some different reasons than we had home educate our son, and we never intended to home educate. And it went right back to when Abel was born. My partner was going to go back to work, and I had really good paternity arrangement at the time. I was at the council, and then I left that job. So we were going to do. She was going to take 6 months, and I was going to take 6 months, one after the other. And I lost my paternity leave because I moved jobs, and she decided to take a full 12 months. Really enjoyed it. In fact, loved being a mum, and decided not to go back to work kind of for the time being. And then, just timing wise, things happened with lockdown where I was working at home a lot more. The arrangements for taking kids to nursery were like, it all became a bit hands off, and you had to be really quite removed from them very quickly. And for lots of reasons, we felt it wasn't the right time for him to start going somewhere. And also, my partner was doing a lot of research into positive parenting, child-led approaches to parenting, and through that came to. So we both do a lot of questioning the system and the way things are normally done, and we like to do things in a way that feels right and authentic for us. And I would say she does a lot more research than me, and is really thorough and great at researching things, and learned lots about child-led parenting, and then that segued into child-led education, and realising that in lots of ways the education system didn't feel like it was going to be the best place for him, and actually that because she was really happy being at home, we could try this approach. So it's called unschooling. It's quite radical, and the idea is your kid does what they want to do when they want to do it. That's it. And the motivation for it is really recognising that a lot of the things that are in place in the education system that we think are there because they're in the child's best interests are not. So, and I think a really good example is the reading age. So it's commonly accepted that 5 is the right age for kids to learn to read. Now, I'd always assumed that that's been worked out based on years of analysis and understanding of kids' development. But the reality is it's because once, so the first thing is kids learn to read at completely different rates, which actually we know because lots of kids get told they're failing because they can't read well when they're 5 and get put into special measures and told they're not performing in a way that they should be as a human being. So that is worth noting. That's not a good message. But also that the reason it's 5 is because once a classroom can all read, then one teacher can set work for a whole classroom because you give them something to read and say, get on with it. Because if they can't read, then they all need individual attention. So it works to support the education system as a place for kids to be while parents are at work.
It's efficiency rather than fundamentals for each child.
Yeah, it's about behaviour control rather than about individual learning. And so what kids get, lots of kids thrive in the school system. And this is really important to note, is like, we don't home educate him because we think every child should be home educated, or because we think the school system is bad for everyone. It just happens to be right for us in our circumstances, and we're lucky we can do that. But the message that kids can get from not meeting standards that don't reasonably apply to everyone anyway is that they're not good enough. You know, and as we were talking about earlier with the kind of coaching stuff, this is one of the things people have to unlearn, isn't it, when they start being coached, is this inner message that they can't make judgments for themselves, that they're not adequate, that somehow they need things that are external to them. I need more knowledge, I need more something else before I can do all these things I want to do. And the big message from coaching for me is, no, you don't, you just start. That's it. Yeah. So the idea with unschooling is what kids learn is to love learning. So rather than learning lots of knowledge and information that they may or may not use and may or not be able to retain because of their particular neurotype or the way they learn to pursue things that are interesting to them in a way that feels nurturing and fun and interesting. And then they learn that learning's fun and that they're capable of it. And coming back to the reading thing, so we'd taken a lot of, my partner in particular had read a lot of research on unschooling. And first of all, you have to go through a process as a parent they call deschooling, which is where you kind of unprogram yourself from all the information that tells you the education system is the only way. Because otherwise,
and that's for the parents, not the kids.
Yeah, for the parents. Because otherwise, you're constantly feeling like you're failing because you're measuring your behaviour and everything against a system that isn't
ingrained in you as well, though.
Totally, that's it. Because there's all these parts of you that are saying, "Why aren't we doing lessons? Why aren't they doing this at this point? Why?" Because learning can look, there's a lot of research that shows kids really learn through play and discovery and experimentation. So coming back to reading, we'd read a lot of accounts from other unschooling parents saying, so the typical age kids learn to read, if you leave them to it, is between 7 and 9. And we'd read all these accounts from parents saying, yeah, he just got fed up of having to ask his brother to read bits off Minecraft to him. So he just seemed to work it out. And we don't know how he does it. Or, oh yeah, my daughter just got interested and she taught herself. She can't explain how she learns to read. She just did.
Wow.
And it's happened with him, with Abel. And he's, he's 8. And there was just a point where he was like really interested in reading. And he learned to read. And now he loves reading and is great at it.
I think even like TV though, right? Like certain kids shows will tell you the ABCs and there's little things you pick up on.
Oh, yeah.
And, we've, as you know, got a dog and we've got a little girl. And the crossovers in like terms of how they develop in those early stages are fascinating because the difference between a dog and a child is the dog gets to a certain point where it kind of reaches its intelligence capacity. And then Harlow hit that probably same period as Walter pretty early on. And now she just keeps going past that and keeps sussing things out. And it's little things that impress you, like social interactions and little bits of manipulation between parents that they just think, how are they learning this, understanding this, and how are they grasping that? No one's ever taught her to manipulate, but it's just within her and she's figured it out. And their brains are like little sponges and there's always little connections happening. And I can see why that would overlap into like something as complex or something as complex as we think as reading,
Yeah, we think it's complex, but my partner was saying to me just the other day, do you know, if walking was taught in schools, then we would quite quickly come to accept that you can't teach kids to walk at home. And we'd be like, well, I don't want to get involved in that because I might get it wrong and he might learn to walk wrong. Do you know what I mean? But actually the philosophy behind it is, again, the same as the coaching one, which is we are all naturally inclined towards our own success, and towards our own thriving. And we're able to develop the conditions for that to happen.
The biggest kickback I think I've seen from homeschooling isn't that going to limit them conforming or knowing how to handle themselves in social situations or work scenarios. But I saw a counter argument the other day, which is, wasn't that what we end up doing as we progress in age anyway? And the ones who typically stick in, this is no shade by the way, people who maybe go for the office jobs, the temping stuff that you did in the past and are very good at it, is that just not them looking into those patterns they've been taught and putting those to use and not being able to maybe think for himself and not being able to think critically? So I always find that really fascinating. I always look at the polar extremes, if that makes sense. People who are really pro-school and love that, maybe they had a really positive experience themselves. I'm probably one of those. I love school, even though I was the youngest in the year by a long way. I felt like I had to work really hard to keep up. And that's instilled quite a strong work ethic and a love for learning on my terms. But I fully appreciate that not everyone feels that way and people develop at different stages and ages. And I don't know, is there anything that's really impressed you about Abel and what he's done? I know you said about basically teaching himself to read, which is pretty cool. It's
amazing, yeah. Lots. And I think, what you've just touched on there is the social thing is the number one concern people have. And I think there's one useful lens to look through is to say, well, so for one thing, actually at school, do you know when you think about how much positive social time did you really spend at school? Do you know? So how much of the time are you in class? How much of the time are you in an uncomfortable situation with other groups of people where you're not always feeling like you know what's happening or you feel safe. How much time you're able to actually spend socialising positively with other people. So that's one thing. But also is recognising that, there is no perfect way to educate children and prepare them for the world. It's getting out there and doing it at whatever age that happens that does that. And home education isn't perfect. The school system isn't perfect. Go on.
Have you got a kind of time frame in which you'd like to homeschool? Are you going to do it from literally the moment they go to university, or...?
We're just going to see what happens. Cool. I think it's about finding out, letting Abel discover what's interesting to him and what he's, what drives him, what he's curious about and where he wants to go, and then supporting him to get whatever educational support he needs to do that. And coming back to your question, actually, is there anything particularly impressive? It's, his... so one is communication. Conversationally, he's like... He absolutely bosses it. He's amazing. And his social skills are incredible. In lots of ways. He's good at learning. He's good at working stuff out. He's very good at social interaction and emotional intelligence. Real strengths. And he's incredibly eloquent and can explain himself really well. In ways that, when your kids say things and you just think, I feel thick by comparison.
Yeah. I always wonder how much of that is down to the parents as well. Like, if you've got two parents who are thinking about being good parents, you're probably going to be a good parent. Whereas there might be people who don't give it that much consideration, and maybe the kid is at a bit of a disadvantage in that sense because they maybe not getting the love at a fundamental level, the experience.
Well, and do you know what? And that's the thing. So this is an artificial, I can't remember what the word, false dichotomy. So there aren't only two paths, but if there were, there's one path which says the way you prepare people for tough experiences in later life is by giving them tough experiences in earlier life. So that's one idea, isn't it? That so if we want kids to be able to thrive as adults in a challenging, social and work environment, then we need to make sure they go through challenging experiences as kids. That's one argument. So therefore, it's right that school is often tough in those aspects. And then there's another counter argument, which is if we want kids to thrive as adults in a tough environment, then actually we need to provide safety and nurturing and love while they build their sense of themselves and they build their self-love and their self-esteem and their courage, and then they'll be fine, and that they'll be, and I suppose it's like, what's that? The strength, the idea, better the bough that bends than the branch that snaps. That actually to be soft in a hard world is not the worst thing. As long as it's grounded in self-compassion and self-love.
I'm always fascinated by how much our intuition can be wrong with kids as well. So I always assume that if you've got a single child, they'd be quite socially awkward, and they wouldn't have that kind of social skill to go and go into a group of people because they've just grown up in a very small group. And we've been having these conversations, me and the missus, because there's talks of a second on the kind of horizon and all this stuff, and would we be happy with one? What would be the repercussions of that? Would we have another? What's the repercussions of that? And you go down these kind of long-winded conversations and avenues, and you try and cover everything. And the worry with only having one was that same thing. Would she be just a little bit, not socially adept? But then I just thought about all the single kids that I knew, my mum being one, and they're all phenomenally sociable. There's a lad I know from school, it's he's, even within our little social group, he's one of the most popular. And I think what happens with single children over time is they have to learn to be more social. They will go out their way to try and start conversations with the groups of kids. Whereas when there's a group of 3 kids in a family, you don't need any other friends, because whenever we go, it's just us and our brothers and things like that. And I have this theory that actually single children are probably extremely more social because they have to go out the way to do it. So if we apply that thinking from a sibling mentality, how much does that overlap into like other things where, you know, whether it's sports or I say education, how much more can kids impress us and change our own preconceptions around stuff than we actually think?
Yeah, and totally that. And I think beyond that, even any sort of attempt to predict how kids are going to develop, in my experience, is utterly futile. I think, you know, when I was doing my postgrad in developmental psychology, one of the thinking at the time, the latest research was about, because there's always been the nature versus nurture debate. I mean, always, for a long time, nature versus nurture. But the thinking then was, so you're born with, you know, certain structure in your brain and your nervous system. You know, some people are born with a larger amygdala, so they've got more of an anxious response to non-threatening situations, or they've got a certain clustering of certain synapses that predicts certain types of emotional response. So to an extent, you're already formed, but then how your environment is and how you're reacted to can radically change how your brain physically develops through childhood. So, for example, you might have a kind of physiological brain structure that is associated with a higher aggression and could lead to you becoming violent, you know, a violent person. You respond violently to things. But what they found was, if you're in an environment that is nurturing and gentle and kind, and you're made to feel safe in situations where you react aggressively or fearfully, then the brain physically changes in response to that, and you become less likely to respond in a violent way. But if you grow up in a violent household where conflict ends in aggression, violence, then those parts of your brain and those pathways and those responses will be expanded. So, you know, when you think about it that way, yes, how we are and how a child's life experiences develop does shape who they are to an extent, but also we just arrive a certain way and we just grow a certain way, and it's the complexity of those things. I don't think so. You know, with our son, when he was very young, so we were always quite gender non-specific in toys, whatever. So, for example, I would buy flowers for my partner. I'd buy flowers for him when he was really little, and things that you might not associate with masculine childhood. And we certainly didn't bring any particular emphasis on, like, you know, the kind of male toys or whatever. We just got things that might be interesting for him. And he very quickly became totally obsessed with power tools and guns. And there's no way we could have predicted that. There's no way we influenced that. We are peaceful, chilled out human beings. I don't even know where he first saw guns. But as soon as he did, he was like, those are for me.
Yeah.
So
Brad's nodding his head like,
I cannot relate more. Like, instantly, Ted digging in the dirt, wanting to pick up animals, wants to get on his bike, wants to pretend everything's a gun, everything's a fight. Like,
you know, and
cool. Yeah.
And it might be that we'd had a daughter and she might have responded exactly the same and might have been obsessed with weapons and power tools.
Yeah.
You know, but so I don't think the takeaway is that boys will be boys. I think it's just that people will be who they are, you know, and you can't really predict or identify what the things that, and I'm sure there'll be a phase when he's not as interested in guns when he's older, or there might not be. He might love guns for the rest of his life, and, like, fair play. If that's the case, it's fine.
I did the opposite. So I, like, you know, as a dad of a girl, was like, let's get her into a tomboy kind of mindset, you know. So I bought her bikes, I bought her, like, tools and hammers and things to have a go at. What else have I got? I think I've got, like, little shooting things. I look around the room here, things I've got. But she just loves babies. She loves putting a baby in a pram and going up and down and feeding it a bottle. She loves pink. Like, pink's her favourite colour. For her birthday that's coming up, I bought, like, this huge carport with, like, cars. I'm trying to get into cars now, like buying a little kind of toy cars. Doesn't really want to know. Probably end up sending that one back at some point. But I think we underestimate how much hormones just drive, even at that early age, just drive kids and things like that. The more chemical reactions that make them want to do things. And
do you think? Interesting. So I wouldn't attribute that to hormones, but I would just attribute it to an unknowable facet of humanity, which is, like, there's just things
possibly,
that, because, and what was coming up for me when you were talking then is about So there's an idea we have, which is that we are capable. It's this kind of hero complex that we can shape things or craft things about what other people do, and one that we should, that it's desirable, that, you know, with our greater knowledge or wisdom or perspective, that somehow we should be changing the way things are for someone else and for their behaviours. But also the idea that we're even capable of doing that. And coming back to the coaching thing, you know, accepting that I'm not responsible for what someone else does. I just am not.
You facilitate.
I can't be. Yeah, I can create space for them to decide what they want to do next, and to support them to make different choices or to explore that for themselves. But ultimately, that's all about them. Nothing about that is me. And the more I can internalize that idea, and the same with parenting. You know, it's not about me kind of imprinting my ideas or principles on him. And the more I try and do that, the more that's going to be resisted.
Yeah.
It's just about accepting and seeing here's what is here, and supporting that to develop and grow.
But that's the beauty of life, isn't it? It's letting that flourish, that creativity within them, going down certain paths. And maybe that's why that kind of, going back to the original topic of conversation there with the homeschooling, that's why that style of homeschooling, letting them lead the way, is so amazing, because it really lets them go down the avenue of what they want to do and excel. And from a business point of view, when you look at it, you as a business find out, you sometimes when you first start in certain areas of business, you try a lot of different things, throw a lot of shit at the wall, just see what sticks. And once you find where your customers are, your selling point, you absolutely hammer that right. And that's how you basically grow your business. With kids, we sometimes guide that too much, and we push them down these avenues, whether it's with school, whether it's with other things that we try and influence them on, sports, for example. Kids who are just completely into art and design, but their parents are just sports fanatics and they want them to play football, and they're just doing it because their parents want them to do it. How much creativity did they miss as a kid? Because it was taken away from them, robbed from them almost. How much better could that have been in later life? How much more free thinking could they be as a little person if we weren't dictating those things so regularly in their life?
Yeah, I love that. And it's a challenge, isn't it? It's a challenge to let go of what's important to you and allow what's important to someone else.
Even at that early age.
Totally. Really hard.
Went to Yorkshire Wildlife Park, and it's amazing to see, like, we looked at the young lion cubs, and just to see them doing what's instinctive to them, wrestling, jumping on stuff, like prowling. It was mad to watch. And you're just like, how do you know how to do that? It's like we see these birds just migrate, and they're just, how do they know? How do they know how to do that? And it's like little boys going to power tools, little girls nursing babies, like, how do you know how to do that?
Sharks, for example, they have like magnetic field. They have magnetic fields around the ocean, don't they? And they know where to go for the warm climates, the cold. They have this preset kind of like direction in this complete. I mean, you drop someone off in the Atlantic Ocean, we'd have no idea what's what. They have this sense of direction there, and it's all inbuilt, isn't it? It's all genetic, it's coding, it's things that are within us that we have never. I mean, the sharks never tried to develop that or go to a class around it or watch a webinar on it. They just know that's what we do, and it's
We never have to follow a framework, a really sharp movement framework.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is what you were speaking about there for me is so in the philosophy of so my approach to organisational development, I suppose, and working with leaders and teams, there's an idea that so human beings have organised themselves forever, always. You know, when you're talking about tribes and everything that came from tribes, where we've willfully put structures of organisation around people and tried to control them has happened for a microscopic amount of time in the history of the world. And we got plenty done without those structures and hierarchies. And we've got into this way of thinking, and I think it comes from fear and a desire to control. And again, you can see the rationale. Well, it's like, well, if we can measure it, we can replicate it, we can scale it, we can control it, we can predict the outcomes, our lives will be more peaceful. That's the idea. But the reality is you lose what works and you create the need for more control. And it's like being a coach who creates the need for more coaching, or being a parent who creates the need for you to be there and observe every time your kid does something slightly risky. And one of the things, you know, about positive parenting, and my partner learned early on. So if you see your kid doing something that is a bit risky, rather than saying be careful, you say have a think about whether that feels safe for you or not. So you're encouraging someone to use their own intuition and tune into that. And it's the same with teams and organisations. You know, what I observed when I was working at the council for 7 years and then working as a consultant with the NHS for 5 years is that desire to control, and which comes from a good place because it's wanting to keep things safe and predictable and knowable. What we do is we remove our trust in our inherent capabilities. So managers are encouraged, right, if you're making this decision that could have a potentially difficult outcome for someone, then follow this framework. And then if you get called out on it or the outcome is not good, then you can blame the framework. You know, it's not about you. You followed the protocol. You're safe. And the risk we're trying to remove is normally tiny, the risk of something bad happening. But it's that desire to control. Whereas actually, what really works is when we support people to trust their intuition and make decisions that involve, yes, data and analysis, but also heart and gut as well, and intuition.
It's a nice breath of fresh air, that, in a world where everything is systemized, automated, just, you know, spreadsheets. And I think what's probably hearing about your story and your journey as well for all these various 30 odd jobs that you've had, it's like, it sounded like every time you jumped ship, maybe you just experienced that little bit of lack of humanization, that little bit more automation, that little bit, you know, of I'm a pencil pusher here, filling boxes out, rather than giving what I think I can give, and that creativity and me being heard of as an individual and my input here. And it sounds like it's led you to this pathway, like, right, how do I do this for myself and incorporate it into my own work, but then also pass this on to everyone else? And kind of you found this little like secret. It's a bit like, I always use Wim Hof as a good example because he found something that just really worked for him. And it turns out that it benefits everyone. Like everyone can benefit from this one thing that he found. And you're in that same category. You found this little thing that works for you and realise that this is awesome. I want everyone to know about this, and I want to integrate this into people's thinking and psyche. And I think by starting with, like, you know, business people, it's awesome because that filters down from the top, doesn't it? Everything filters down from the top.
Yeah, and so much of our lives are work, you know, and so much is wasted through the time we spend at work, being inhumane and non-soulful with each other. And just what you've said there. So the earliest jobs I had, I always had this feeling that the real me is here and the work me is here. Yeah. That I'm kind of having to pretend and put on this kind of version of myself. And then as I progressed through my career, those 2 points got closer and closer and closer until actually me at work was just the same as me out of work. And in fact, I could start to experiment a bit with who I was at work. And then that could bleed into the rest of my life. So work became a bit of a playful space to explore what am I capable of and what's interesting to me in those things. And I just think work can be that for anyone. And it's not about necessarily what you're doing either. And I've always wanted to have a positive impact in my work somehow. And I used to think in order to do that, I needed to work in public services. You know, I needed to be somewhere that is about, it's all positively orientated. It's not about just generating profit for someone, or, you know, and I've got my own values still about what I think is or isn't where I want to put my energy and time. But I suppose what I learned more over time was less about what you're doing and more about how you're doing it. And actually helping any business to create work that fosters the human spirit rather than suppresses it. That's got to be a net good.
Yeah, I've had so many of the same experiences of that, like dehumanization within companies. I mean, I haven't worked or been employed by a company for a long time, but one of my last jobs was in retail, and I remember the shops would be dead during the week, right? You know, 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, there's not many people there. And so we just, between like the staff, start talking on the shop floor. And I remember managers come upstairs going, "What are you doing? Why is this turning into some kind of social club?" I'm like, "There's no one here. The shop's dead. It's completely dead. If you don't want us to talk now, like, when do you want us to talk?" Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I never really got it. It was almost like I felt like I was back at school almost. And that's what I really hated about that job in particular, is that, like, here are the boxes. Stick with them. Here are the guidelines and the rules. Stick with them. Don't venture outside. And I was really into my fashion as well, and I like to sometimes have a bit of input. So I'd try and, like, even, you know, if I saw they had like a creative director on the shop floor who was dressing all the mannequins and stuff, and I'd go, I really think those would look pretty cool with that. And she'd like listen to me a little bit and go, yeah, I like the idea, but the catalogue says this, so I can't really veer off that. Leave it, don't worry. There's no room for like input and like experimentation, and the dehumanization was massive in those places.
Yeah, that resonates. And it's that, and two things came up for me when you were talking. One is about the culture of fear, I suppose, or mistrust, which is, so that manager who's heard you talking, they're going to be worried about, what if someone knows that I let these people talk? What's that going to look like for me? Because then I'm not doing my job properly. So, and I've got a responsibility here. So rather than being trusted to trust themselves, so to have an objective, which is hit these sales targets, however you do it, within this set of values or principles. Instead, it's do these things at this time of day in this exact way and follow these exact. And there's another great quote, which I'm going to misquote, which is from D. Hock, who was a chief exec of Visa, and it was a really progressive thinking guy. He came up with a model of leadership, which I love, called the chaotic path, which is really worth looking up. And it's about balancing just the right amount of chaos with just the right amount of order. But the quote is something along the lines of, with simple, clear instructions allow complex, intelligent solutions, and complicated instructions create simple, stupid behaviours. Do you know? And it's like, because you lock down, you lock everything down into this little container, because and every bit of it says, you can't be trusted, you can't be trusted, you can't be trusted, you can't be trusted, you can't make decisions, you can't be creative. Like, how could you possibly know what trousers go with what shirt?
But you can kind of almost sympathise on the other side, because you've got these CEOs of these huge like fashion brands, and they've got their own ideas of what works, and if they give out too much room for like creativity, that just trickles down from like area managers to store managers to people on the shop floor to the salespeople, and all of a sudden it's everyone kind of doing what they want. So there has to be a nice balance between like, here's the guidelines, but there's room for creativity depending on like, where you are in the country, for example. So like fashion changes based on like whether you're in London or Scotland or Manchester. And so you can't have like one conformed sense of like, this is how it is across the country. There has to be room for a little bit of, wiggle depending on where you are.
And do you think, so what was in my head as you were talking, have you read the E-Myth Revisited?
E-Myth?
The E-Myth. No. So it's the entrepreneurial myth, it's short for.
Okay.
I don't think it's a great title, but it's a very good book. But he talks about building a scalable business. But he does it in a way that feels like it contains humanness. And I suppose what I was wondering when you were talking then is the importance of the people being trusted with the context in which those decisions are made. So, for example, if it is the case that... So basically what he says is systematize, document everything, all of your processes, but when you bring someone new into the business, what they get is not just a manual, they also get the founder's story. So here's why things are done the way they are. This is the principle behind what we do. So we trust you to know and understand. So in that case... the manager, when you were saying, can we put these clothes together here? They would have said, well, the reason we can't is because this is what's happening this season. We're selling this particular line. We're promoting this particular look, which goes back to this trend in London Fashion Week or whatever it is. And then it's like, okay, I can understand that and I can see. And then you might be able to make a suggestion that fits within the parameters that are set. But also you feel like you can accept the decision a bit easier because you can see why it's being made that way.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I think that is really fundamentally missed in our systematization is context. Because I think if people have the context and they understand why things are the way they are, they're trusted with that.
Yeah. And
we trust that people can hold all of that.
I totally get that. And I think that founder's message at the start is a brilliant idea. Like if I'd gone into that job just as a general salesperson on a shop floor and been given the founder's story of why it's here at this point, what got it to this kind of level, where his original idea was, I'd have context. Rather than just coming in at a point in a business where you have no idea how old the business is, who started it, where it is. You're just given a certain job, you're a cog in the machine, go and do your job as a cog. Whereas if I come in, I've got this sense of like understanding of where I am, what this business represents, who started it, who founded it, then my kind of suggestions and my creativity have a little bit of a bias anyway, because I'm coming into this business having known where I am at the point of contact and employment. So, yeah, what's it called? That the E-Myth. I'm going to read
the
that.
E-Myth Revisited, yeah. And there's an idea, there's a leadership practice that I'm a strong advocate of, participatory leadership. And the idea is that organisations, purpose-led organisations, and any organisation can be purpose-led, you know, the most kind of commercial, gritty business can be purpose-led, have an evolutionary purpose within the participatory leadership idea. So the kind of traditional, the way we see leadership enacted most often is that you've got, here's the purpose of the organisation, you've got the leader here, and they can see the purpose, and then they bite off chunks of it and feed them down here. So they say, I want you to be responsible for doing this, and then that's handed on as simple instructions for these little nuggets of activity that need to happen to serve this purpose. But none of you are allowed to see or connect with this purpose. It's all about activities and achievements and goals. That's what's handed down. And the idea with participatory leadership is the organisation has an evolutionary purpose, so it constantly grows and evolves. So it's not, which is what you were talking about earlier with your business, you know, it starts off as one thing and then you tune in and what could it be? What does it need to be now? It evolves. And the leader's job is to listen to and be curious about that purpose and invite everyone else in around it and say, look, this is what we're here for. What do you want to do about that? Or this is what we're here for. I want you to do this. How does that sound? How do you want to do it? What could be different?
Totally get it. Yeah, resonates massively. And I think that it's actually got me thinking about my own founder's kind of story now. And like, what would that be? Like if I'm the founder of my business, so, you know, if I was to pass that on to someone else now, I don't have any employees. We've had a few people working in the past, but if I was to pass that to other people, what would that look like? So really got me thinking, actually.
It does get you thinking. Chris, you've been very generous with your time so far. I always like to end with a bit of a reflection question. So I think yours is going to be very, very unique. I always ask people to give 3 words about your parenting experience so far, which I appreciate is almost like an impossible question because you have to condense that down into 3 singular words to describe what you've gone through so far with your son.
3 words. Well, joyful, transformative, this is very difficult. I use a lot of words. So being limited to 3 is really hard.
Joy, transformative. I like those 2.
That's the first time we've had definitely transformative.
And the last one I'm going to say, I need to provide some. I need to explain it afterwards, which is confronting, is what I would say, because I don't know if this resonates with both of your experience. But for me, particularly earlier on, maybe in my parenting journey, I just found lots of my experiences with my son kind of shone a light on things that I wasn't happy about in myself and that I hadn't resolved in some way. You know, so just the way I reacted to certain situations and thinking, I thought I was a bit more mature and grown up than this, but actually highlighting things in myself that I hadn't resolved and wasn't comfortable with, and being confronted with those. So just a constant reminder and invitation to learn and grow as a person. And yeah, confronting, I think there's a better way to put it, but that's the word I
get
use
it.
for that.
No, I understand it. And I agree. Totally agree with that, yeah. It confronts you and your framework as a person. I know framework isn't a word we're going to be ending this podcast with. But we all have like an inner framework to a certain degree, don't we? And
yeah.
Kids challenge pretty much every single aspect of that. Yeah.
Love it. Chris, if people want to check out some of the amazing work you're doing at Possible Coaching, where can they find you if they wanted to reach out?
LinkedIn's probably the best space where things are most alive. There's a website which is thisispodsible.co.uk. But go to my LinkedIn. I'm Chris Hewitt on LinkedIn and drop me a message, follow me. I do share quite a bit on there.
That's a pretty cool website name as well.
I was going to say that was really cool. Yeah, this is possible. Did you have to pay a lot for that? Or?
Yeah.
I can't remember. It wasn't cheap, but also it wasn't me that came up with it. I worked with a really incredible organisation, and a particular individual came up with that name, and he created my brand as well.
Awesome.
For anyone who's not seen Chris's brand, please go and search it, because it's really cool. It's one of my favourite logos I've ever seen.
Is it?
Yeah, it's really cool.
I'm intrigued now. Okay. Straight after this, I'll be Googling it.
That's it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I'm very proud of it. And I didn't create it, but the guy who did is extremely talented.
It's very cool.
I think it's quite important the founders don't create their own logos. That's one thing I would say. Get a professional.
Amen.
For sure. Chris, thank you, man. Appreciate that. Really good today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Love it, mate.
Thanks, fellas.
Guys, thank you for joining us on the Fitness Podcast. See you next one.
See you soon.
Mega, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Really good.
Thanks,